It's hard to think of a more famous opening to a piece of classical music than the first few notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. They are a remarkable call to attention, a single-minded statement of intent, and of course, known right across the world. They've been plundered for everything from cartoon soundtracks to pop songs. Those few notes are so iconic, in fact, that they've almost become a shorthand for classical music itself. When you think about it, perhaps that's only fitting. After all, those notes represent music reduced to its most basic building blocks. An urgent rhythm that grabs you and demands that you listen. It's hardly what you'd call a melody. It's just a couple of notes without even any harmony to support them. Just a few musicians playing in unison. In many ways, it's hard to think of anything simpler. Those notes have become so famous that they've taken on a life far beyond anything Beethoven originally conceived for them. For example, in the Second World War, Belgian resistance fighters began using the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth. The Belgian fighters needed a simple symbol that would immediately unify the bilingual French and Flemish-speaking forces, and they quickly came up with the letter V for victoire, victory in French, and vrijheid, freedom in Flemish. That letter V quickly got translated into music as those opening notes from Beethoven's Fifth follow the same short, 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 long pattern as the letter V in Morse code. So it became a musical symbol of defiance and unity, and it was one that was soon taken up more widely across the Allied forces. Those distinctive notes that opened Beethoven's Fifth were also used as what we might now call a radio jingle during World War II. They introduced coded wartime broadcasts made by the BBC to the Special Operations Executive, also known as Churchill's Secret Army. 3 decades later, those same notes became a symbol of human cultural achievements on a more global level. The first movement of Beethoven's Fifth was launched on a galactic journey. It was chosen as one of the musical elements on the famous Golden Record, sent into outer space aboard the 1977 Voyager mission. The intention being that any extraterrestrials who came across the record, and who worked out how to play it, of course, would be able to hear what we humans were capable of. Around the same time, though on a less cosmic scale, Beethoven's Fifth also got a couple of memorable pop makeovers. Rock band Electric Light Orchestra used the Fifth Symphony's famous opening notes as the beginning of their typically over-the-top cover version of Chuck Berry's Roll Over Beethoven. And New York songwriter and producer Walter Murphy came up with a disco version. He named it A Fifth of Beethoven, and it even made its way onto the soundtrack of Saturday Night Fever. So we can't deny there's clearly something special about the opening to Beethoven's Fifth. It lodges in the memory, hooks the imagination, even seems to point to some kind of hidden significance. Everyone wants to know what those notes mean. It's nothing new. Even just after Beethoven's death, his secretary Anton Schindler claimed they represented fate knocking at the door, which is usually dismissed as invention nowadays. Beethoven's pupil Carl Czerny claimed they were based on the song of a yellowhammer Beethoven heard in Vienna. The notes themselves open up so many questions. First, there's a question of interpretation. Should they be played straight or more slowly than the music that comes after them to give them the importance they deserve? Should they even be slowed down as they progress? There are countless different ways of interpreting them, each seeming to have its own subtly different meaning. Different conductors down the centuries have tried them all, no doubt keen to stamp their own individual mark on one of classical music's most iconic moments. Even in terms of harmony, things aren't clear. If we go by just those opening notes, we could be in the dark, turbulent world of C minor, which is the symphony's true key, or we could equally be in the brighter, more optimistic world of E-flat major. There's something about the feeling. There's always been major and minor in music, and it feels like so many of those other classical symphonies go for the sort of sadness and that more gentle emotion of the minor. It's not just sadness, it's like life and death. That's why it's so important. It's got that real feeling of sort of doom and dread and fear all wrapped up. There's nothing in those opening notes themselves to tell us where we are. But by the time the movement's opening section circles back on itself for a repeat, we definitely are in the bolder, happier E-flat major key. So at that point, we might well hear those opening notes quite differently. Beethoven's very careful too about which instruments he chooses to play those notes. For his Fifth Symphony, he calls for an orchestra of flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, horns, trumpets, timpani, and strings. But he only uses clarinets and strings for those opening notes. Why is that? Just imagine how it might have sounded if he'd used all the instruments at his disposal. It could have had the same kind of blazing colour and energy that Beethoven reserves for the very end of the symphony. Would that have been the right mood for the opening? Probably not. Here, he seems to be going for something dark and assertive, certainly, but not too outspoken. He's asking us his opening question, but he's not yet ready to give us his answer. And it's that journey from his dark opening question to gloriously affirmative final answer that forms the symphonies. It's a grand voyage from darkness and turmoil to light and joy. The symphony's first movement seems obsessed with the notes that opened it. They're present in one form or another in almost every moment of the movement. And they come back as more distant memories too throughout the symphony's remaining 3 movements. Using those opening notes over and over again like this gives the whole symphony a remarkable unity and a solid structural integrity. It's as if everything links back in some way to the same material. But the fact that Beethoven used those opening notes so widely in the symphony surely points to some personal significance. The key that Beethoven chose, C minor, held a special personal significance for him. It was a key he didn't use often. Instead, he reserved it for pieces that have gone on to become some of his most iconic works. His Pathétique Piano Sonata, for example, his Third Piano Concerto, or even the Funeral March from his Eroica Symphony. They all feature music of high tragedy and intense drama, but also of determination, heroism, and resilience. And those qualities are reflected in the Fifth Symphony's music too. After the first movement, the gentle dance of its slower second movement and the dark, sinister third movement, Beethoven leads us without a break into the blazing glory of his finale. There, we suddenly see the turmoil and darkness of C minor transformed into the dazzling brightness of C major. Even in the finale's glorious optimism, however, the symphony's questioning opening notes return. Now, though, they're transformed into something defiant and joyful. Will we ever know what Beethoven meant by the opening notes of his Fifth Symphony? Are they fate knocking at the door, or simply a bird chirruping in a Viennese park? It's probably the wrong question in the first place. If we want to know what those opening notes mean, we need to look instead at what they become, which is a source of joy against the odds, of determination, defiance, and decisiveness. And with that message in mind, it's hardly surprising that Beethoven's Fifth has become one of classical music's most iconic creations.